It all started with a fence, a ridiculous little white fence with those decorated ends that look like they're straight out of a Live the American Dream catalog. When it appeared on the edge of my property, I thought it was a measurement error, a slip of a centimeter, a silly thing. It's not the first time that neighbors have confused land boundaries, especially in regions where the sense of ownership is as fragile as the ego of those who live here. But then the little fence became 2, then 3, and before I knew it, concrete was being poured. And then there was this weird feeling. Not anger yet, suspicion. Like when you walk into your house and feel that someone has gone through your drawers, but nothing is out of place. Except that, in this case, the nothing out of place was workmen in orange hard hats drilling into the soil in my backyard as if they were making breakfast in their own kitchen. I went there, with the calmness of someone who knows they're in the right, and there she was, that woman, in khaki pants, a floral button-down shirt, and that damn walkie-talkie hanging from her belt like she was a sheriff in a western shantytown. He didn't even bother to pretend to be surprised when he saw me. He just raised his eyebrow as if to say, "Problem?" I asked her what, in the name of common sense, she thought she was doing on my land. She replied like someone commenting on the weather forecast, "Approved HOA expansion. Community Revitalization Zone. It's all in the master plan." Master plan. She said it without blinking. I don't know which part irritated me more, the fact that she knew it was mine, or the calmness with which she spoke as if she had the power to define urban boundaries. I felt invaded, not just physically, but psychologically. It was as if my history, my property, my memory were just a blank piece of paper for her to write over. Little by little, lampposts appeared. Plaques with the name of the new neighborhood were stuck in the ground as a banner of conquest. And the most absurd thing, she started selling the houses. Yes, selling. As if the land were hers. As if I were a forgotten detail of the landscape. The advertisements promised an oasis of tranquility in a privileged area. And underneath, the cherry on top, complete infrastructure, selected neighborhood, under quality management, her management. When I saw the number 83 stamped on the flyers as residential units delivered, I felt dizzy. The kind of dizziness you only feel when the world decides to pass you by without even looking you in the eye. My land, where I planted trees, raised children, buried my dog, and built memories, was now a residential colony named after a woman who thinks the word community comes with an instruction manual and a fine for non-compliance. I tried the formal channels. I took the deed, the plan, the GPS, even the damn aerial photo from Google Earth, with my name marked in red. At the notary's office, they looked at me with pity. They said she had registered the plots with alternative paperwork. They invented a community interest occupation project and attached a map that looked like it had been drawn by a child with motor coordination problems. When I saw that, I wanted to laugh, to cry, to sit on the edge of the asphalt and let the madness take me. Because it's not every day that you find out that your piece of the world has been illegally plotted by an out-of-control HOA. And on top of that, it's decorated with solar lamps and park benches with signs saying, "Private property, HOA family safe zone." The final cherry on top? She had the audacity to notify me. That's right. She sent me a letter, stamped with the seal of the Residents Association, saying that my unauthorized presence on the residential perimeter was causing discomfort to the new residents. She literally kicked me off my own land, and she signed it as Urban Planning Manager for the Eastern Sector, East Sector. My farm, my pasture, the trail where I taught my son to ride his bike, now renamed after a shopping center. But this is where the story begins to turn. Because what she didn't know, the detail she completely ignored in her plan for residential domination, is that I wasn't just any farmer. I wasn't a peaceful pensioner. I was the owner of a demolition company, the biggest in the region. specializing in surgical implosions, urban removals, and the recovery of areas contaminated by concrete and arrogance. She built 83 houses on my land. Illegal houses, flimsy houses, made with cheap bricks, improvised plumbing and pride as a foundation. And me? Well, I have 12 backhoes, 3 tractors, 2 wrecking balls, and a team trained in tearing down structures faster than she can say, not up to HOA standards. And there, that afternoon when I received the eviction notice from my own land, I understood that I no longer needed to wait for justice in the formal way. Justice would come with a tractor, dust, noise, and impact. Because sometimes, to get back what is yours, you have to break it. You need to crumble. You have to reduce arrogance to the pile of rubble it has always been. The woman had built an illegal empire in my shadow, and now it was time for the shadow to grow. The day I chose to start the operation fell on a Tuesday. Tuesday seems like a useless day, doesn't it? Nobody expects anything great to happen on a Tuesday. It's the day of the week that lives in the shadow of the hated Monday and the hopeful Wednesday, and that's exactly why I chose it. The surprise factor would be absolute. Her HOA would never have expected her empire of little houses with white picket fences and patriotic flags to collapse on the day of selective collection. I organized everything with military precision, every machine positioned in advance, every operator trained not to leave a single wall standing. Before sunrise, my people were already in the trucks, waiting for my signal. And when the first bolt of lightning cut through the sky, I pressed the button on the radio and said the only sentence necessary: breakfast time. Because that's what demolition is for us. Routine, part of the job. The difference is that on that day, what was being demolished wasn't just concrete. It was arrogance. It was arrogance wrapped in drywall. It was a woman who believed that her informal power was worth more than a notarized deed. She showed up at 6:42 a.m., barefoot, wearing a bathrobe, and with the crumpled face of someone who never imagined she would have to negotiate with excavators. She tried to keep her posture, but failed at the first step. She tripped over a "Welcome to Vista Serena condominium" sign. The irony almost made me laugh. "Are you crazy?" she shouted, her voice still pasty with sleep and built-up anger. "These are family homes. There are children sleeping." I returned with a dry tone. "People have been sleeping on my land for months. I thought it was time to wake up." She tried to get the other HOA members together, to call in the legal representatives as a matter of urgency. But no one wanted to buy the fight. The realtors who had sold the houses disappeared. The lawyers who promised legal support evaporated. She was left with her floral robe and the expression of a widow from a condominium dictatorship. I tried to maintain decency. I really did. I gave her 20 minutes, a generous amount of time, enough time to collect what was personal and leave with some dignity. But she preferred to set up symbolic barricades. She put up traffic cones, piled up bags of earth, tried to stop one of the machines with an empty baby carriage. The scene was so absurd that it looked like an experimental performance about despair and denial. At 7:03, the first wall fell, an explosion of dust, noise, and internal applause. It was like watching a house of cards being blown away. And the more it fell, the clearer it became how big a delirium that woman had built. Houses glued together, without proper ventilation, without a sewage system connected to the city system. A pile of concrete piled on top of administrative lies. The neighborhood began to wake up with a bang. People in their pajamas peered out of the windows, some recording on their cell phones, others trying to understand why their neighbor's house was now a pile of bricks and loose wiring. Some ran, others tried to argue, but all they had to do was show the paper, the deed, the original floor plan, the court order, and everyone backed away in silence, embarrassed that they had bought into a falsified dream. She screamed non-stop. She ran around like a possessed trustee, begging the residents to unite against me. But no one moved. No one wanted to be complicit in such an open collapse. Her empire was crumbling into dust, and she still believed she could call the shots. When the 10th house fell, she changed tactics. She tried to cry. She knelt in front of the machine as if she were a martyr in a private cult. And all I could think was, funny. She never cried for the families who were kicked out of their old homes to make room for her little houses. She never cried for the trees she had cut down without permission, or for the stream she diverted to build a pickleball court that nobody asked for. So I dropped house number 11. By noon, half the condominium was rubble. In the background, you could hear the news coming in. Reporters trying to interview the villagers, helicopters flying overhead, and her still there, motionless, like a museum piece that no one else wanted to visit. The tractor passed a few meters from her, and she didn't even move. She was paralyzed by something worse than fear, the loss of control, because that was what hurt her most of all. It wasn't the demolition itself, nor the screams of the residents, nor the sound of metal twisting under the tires of the bulldozers. It was the end of the illusion of authority. It was seeing that the rules she'd invented, the signs she'd had printed, the bulletins she'd written in serif font and arrogant language, all of this wasn't worth a penny in the face of a legitimate deed and a synchronized demolition fleet. What she built with carbon paper and an inflated ego, I dismantled with legality and brute force. By the end of the day, with the sun beginning to hide behind the horizon, there were only 17 houses left standing, and she, now sitting on a plastic chair, staring at nothing, with a bottle of water in her hand, and her soul visibly defeated. She still tried to breathe one last sigh of grandeur. She stood up slowly, smoothed her hair, and said, "It won't stay like this." I replied with a tired smile, "It already has. And tomorrow, it continues." That night, I slept better than I had in the last 6 months, because it wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming the space that was mine. It was about showing that sometimes justice doesn't wear a suit. It wears a helmet, an orange vest, and arrives with noise. And the best was yet to come. Because in the HOA files that my lawyer had access to, there was a lot more dirt than badly cured concrete. And in Part 3, that's where the real demolition begins. Just ask, and I'll follow. While the dust from the demolished houses was still settling on the trampled grass, a new kind of rubble began to emerge. Only this one didn't make a sound. It didn't break glass or crumble concrete. It was sneakier, dirtier, deeper. It was bureaucratic debris, hidden in colorful folders, filed away in the back of the HOA's office, which, by the way, was also the basement of her house, the command center, as she liked to call it. During the legal proceedings that dragged on after the demolition began, we gained access to everything. Every document, every email, every spreadsheet. And that's when the hole got much, much deeper. The first pages were already a scandal in themselves. Forged contracts, digital signatures of people who no longer lived in the city, stamps that had clearly been copied from other documents. Not only had she built illegally, she had set up a complete legal makeup operation to back it all up. A legal theater, a PowerPoint of community corruption. Every house built on my land had been sold on the basis of documents as flimsy as wet drywall. But it didn't stop there. As the investigations deepened, heavier things began to come to light. One spreadsheet caught the eye. Internal Resident Control Register. It was basically a list with names, phone numbers, and next to it, bizarre notes like questionable behavior, does not align with HOA values, maintains flag different from official flag. Yes, it had an official flag, created by herself, baby blue, with a golden hibiscus in the center, a symbol of regulatory peace, according to one of her newsletters. Her obsession was such that she created a scoring system for residents. The more obedient they were, the more benefits they received. Priority parking, exclusive invitations to meetings, discounts on club services. But anyone who fell foul of the ranking was slowly boycotted. No warning, no chance to defend themselves. They were just isolated, ignored, and excluded. The problem was that this system wasn't just symbolic. It used this score to decide who could and couldn't buy houses in the condominium. It controlled access to housing based on personal criteria. There were people on the red list just because they wore too dark clothes, or because they had 2 cats instead of 1. In one case, the note read, "Risk of noise, scandalous laughter identified at barbecue." Can you believe that? And in the middle of all this, there were contracts with ghost companies, service providers who received monthly payments from the HOA, gardening companies, security companies, maintenance companies, all registered in the names of people connected to the HOA, relatives, former college classmates, even the nephew who sold scratch cards on the beach. The money from the association went straight into her pocket, in an endless loop of cynicism and cynicism. In one email, she boasted, "The community is under control. No one has realized that everything goes through me." She was right. Nobody did notice. Until now. When my lawyer read this, he looked at me with the expression of someone who had just bitten into pepper. This isn't just illegal. This is criminal on a level that involves the FBI, the IRS, the Justice Department, and probably some obscure sector that doesn't even exist on paper. I made a point of not letting the bomb go off at once. I chose the path of slow torture. I passed the documents on to the right bodies, of course. But before that, I released excerpts, fragments, carefully selected bits and pieces to groups of residents. I would take a sentence, an image, a spreadsheet, and throw it into the group like someone throwing gasoline on a barbecue. The effect was immediate. Residents began to revolt. Those who had previously believed that she was just too organized realized that they were being manipulated like pieces on a twisted chessboard. People who thought they had bought a home discovered that they had financed a cult with an urban planning facade. The woman, hitherto silent since the second wave of demolitions, reappeared at an extraordinary meeting, a desperate attempt to regain control. It was an event worthy of a documentary. She entered the room with the posture of someone who still believes she is the leader, but without the firmness of before. Her close-cropped hair didn't hide the dark circles under her eyes, and her high heels only made noise in a room that was too quiet. She picked up the microphone and began to speak in a soft, rehearsed, but shaky voice. "I only wanted the good of the community. You know that. I gave my life to this place. All the work, the events, the improvements, it was all done with love and sacrifice." The silence was broken by the deep voice of one of the oldest residents who until then had never been involved in a fight. "You sold my grandson's house with a false contract. Was that also done with love?" She froze. She took a deep breath, like someone who wants to cry but doesn't have the strength. She tried to continue her speech, but the audience was no longer listening. Her words hit the ceiling and fell back, empty, because no one there was buying anything anymore, neither metaphorically nor literally. That night, the police knocked on her door. The warrant was clear: seizure of all electronic devices, blocking of accounts, and coercive arrest to give evidence. The sound of the car echoing through the quiet streets was almost poetic, the kind of sound that marks the end of an era, and that warns, at high volume, that the party of lies is over. The news spread faster than wildfire. The press came. Social media came. People who had never heard of the city came wanting to know more about the criminal trustee who built a city on stolen land. The case became a symbol. It became a warning. It became an example of what happens when you give too much power to people who only know how to use rulers and scissors. And there, at that moment, I understood that the real demolition hadn't even been the houses. The real demolition was this: the lies, the moralistic facade, that of the invented power. And there was still more to come. Because there are some things that even the fall of walls can't solve. There are people who need to be exposed with every brick turned over, every rusty nail pulled out of the ground. And in Part 4, all this would come to light: the past, the origin, the final fall. Just say the word, and I'll close this saga with the final straw. What was left of the condominium wasn't just rubble, cracked concrete, and a roof piled up like scrap metal. Memory remained, a bitter kind of memory, the kind that leaves a taste of metal in your mouth. Passers-by no longer saw a neighborhood. They saw a moral crater, a monument to the bloated ego of a woman who, for years, thought that the law was optional, a woman who planted 83 illegal structures, and in the end, reaped rubble, public shame, and the loneliness that only failure can offer. After the seizure of the documents and the arrest warrant, the city went into a trance. People walked along the sidewalks talking quietly, as if everything had turned into a soap opera that was too bad to be talked about out loud. The few who still defended her fell silent, not out of regret, but out of fear of being associated with something that now carried serious labels: embezzlement, ideological falsehood, real estate fraud, and, to top it off, gang formation. The investigation revealed that she wasn't acting alone. 3 members of the former HOA board were involved. 2 civil engineers and a realtor who had been operating with false documents since before the first brick was laid. It was a letterhead cartel. They used the facade of a community association to launder money, run housing scams, and maintain a system of urban favoritism where those who obeyed smiled, and those who disagreed were emotionally demolished. At the last preliminary hearing, she tried to blame everything on others. She said she was just the face of the project, that she trusted too much, that she was also a victim. The judge didn't buy it. Nobody swallowed it, because everything had her signature: the flyers, the letters, the eviction notices. The woman wasn't just her face, it was the mind behind it, the contaminated brain that believed that a neighborhood should function like a chessboard, with her as the queen, and everyone else as obedient pawns, ready to be sacrificed if they got out of line. The sickest thing wasn't even the fraud itself. It was the logic behind it, the coldness with which he manipulated people, the way it used fine words to camouflage abuse. He called a boycott a reorganization of coexistence. She called a false complaint a protocol adjustment. He called expulsion residential repositioning, a whole vocabulary built to hide the fact that, deep down, she was just another corner dictator. And while all this was going on, I watched, not with pleasure, but with that bittersweet sense of justice being done the right way, after having been ignored for so long. It's not revenge when all you want is reparation. It's not hatred when what drives you is the desire to see evil undone, stone by stone. The city, which was previously silent in the face of her presence, now mobilized. There were public assemblies, petitions calling for the complete dissolution of the old HOA, people offering to rebuild the devastated areas with their own hands, but this time in a different spirit. No standardized white picket fences, no inspectors disguised as good neighbors. The new plan was to restore humanity to the neighborhood, to allow loud laughter, clothes on the line, dogs barking outside the permitted hours, to give back the simple right to exist. The day before the main trial, I received a letter, handwritten, signed by her, 3 pages, beige paper, nice handwriting, but the content? A show of self-deception. She said that she had never wanted to hurt anyone, that it had all been for harmony, that I had reacted harshly, and that she hoped that one day I would be able to forgive. I read the letter sitting down, my boots still dirty from the muddy ground. When I'd finished, I tore it into small strips and threw it into the bucket of dry cement. Because forgiveness isn't written in ink, it's built with action. And until the last minute, she was still trying to save her own image. She still saw herself as a victim of someone else's brutality, not as the author of her own downfall. In court, the verdict was so quick that it seemed rehearsed. Guilty on all charges. Indefinite house arrest, monitoring bracelet, total blocking of assets linked to the HOA, and an obligation to make partial reparations to all the injured residents. She left without saying a word. Head down, shoulders bowed. For the first time, she seemed to understand that the real world cannot be shaped by internal bulletins and meeting minutes. Her house, which was at the top of the hill, isolated from the others, was up for auction. Nobody wanted it, and it was demolished the following month. Yes, by me. Irony of fate. The last wall to fall was hers. A house overlooking nothing, surrounded by everything she had destroyed. Today, the land that was once the scene of the biggest residential invasion in the city's history is empty, clean, ready to be reborn. Children are playing there again. People walk more freely. And sometimes someone passes me and jokingly asks, "Do you still have a vacancy at your demolition company?" I answer with a smile. Because now, the only thing that needs to be torn down is the idea that power is about control. Demolition has never been just about walls and cement. Sometimes it's about liberating an entire place and leaving room for something more human to flourish. And if you liked this video, don't forget to leave a comment and a like.